The sky of Valora was filled with soft golden light as two suns rose above the crystal towers of the royal city. The air shimmered gently, and the palace stood like a giant jewel in the middle of shining gardens. Birds with bright wings flew between tall glass trees, and fountains made of blue light sang with a calm tone. The people of Valora were proud of their world. Everything around them had been created with careful design and balance. Every creature, plant, and machine was built by the royal labs under the command of the king. Nothing existed by chance. Inside the great palace, Princess Lurian walked down the wide hall of mirrors. Her long silver robe touched the glowing floor, and her eyes reflected the morning light. She was young but wise for her age. She had studied the history of her people, their science, and the worlds they ruled. Her father, King Varan, was the ruler of the Solar Kingdom, which stretched across 7 planets. The family believed that every intelligent life in their domain had been shaped by royal hands. It was a world of order, control, and perfect beauty. That day, something unusual was happening. A small ship from another world was landing in the royal courtyard. Liren had never seen such a ship before. It looked simple and old compared to the shining vessels of Valora. The outer shell was rough and burned in places. The guards watched carefully, unsure if it was safe. The king had ordered the visitors to be welcomed with respect but caution. Liren stood on the balcony as the ship opened. From inside, a group of strangers stepped out. They were humans from a planet called Earth. They were not tall, and their clothes were made of thick fabric instead of crystal or light. Their skin came in many shades, and their eyes carried a mix of calm and confidence. At first sight, they seemed weak compared to the tall and glowing Valorans. Yet there was something strong in the way they walked. Commander Dale, the leader of the humans, bowed politely. His face showed no fear. He spoke with a voice that was clear and firm. "We come in peace from Earth. We seek knowledge and friendship." Liren nodded but felt curious. In her world, no one ever came from beyond without royal permission. She guided them into the palace. The halls were tall and shining, filled with gentle music from the energy walls. Servants made of light moved quietly around them, carrying trays and messages. The humans looked around with wonder. Dale said softly to his team, "The world is beautiful, but too perfect. I can almost feel the silence behind it." When the group reached the grand dining hall, the king was already waiting. He sat on a floating throne made of crystal and gold. His presence filled the room with authority. His eyes were bright blue, and his voice deep and slow. "Welcome, travelers of Earth. You stand before the Solar Kingdom. Tell us about your kind. Who made you, and for what purpose?" The question made Dale pause for a moment. He looked at his crew and then at the king. "We were not made by anyone, Your Majesty. We were born from nature. Our world shaped us through time and struggle. We have no creator king." The words echoed in the silent hall. Every Valoran looked shocked. Liren blinked, not understanding. On Valora, creation without control was unthinkable. Every life form was designed with care, purpose, and rule. How could a species simply appear on its own? The king raised a hand. "You claim your kind came from chance? That you evolved without design?" Dale nodded calmly. "Yes, we learned, we grew. We survived many trials. That is how humanity came to be." The king leaned back on his throne. "Interesting. Dangerous, perhaps, but interesting. Tonight, you will join us for a feast. We will speak more of this strange origin." The humans bowed respectfully. Liren watched them carefully. Something about them disturbed her, yet also fascinated her. They were not afraid. Even in front of the most powerful ruler in the stars, they spoke with steady hearts. That evening, the royal feast began. Long tables floated above the shining floor, covered with glowing fruits, crystal drinks, and silver dishes. Music filled the hall. Creatures of light danced slowly in the air. The humans sat together, looking both amazed and uneasy. Liren sat near them. Her father began the feast with a speech about unity and peace. Then he invited Commander Dale to speak about Earth. Dale stood and spoke in a simple voice. He described a world full of oceans, forests, deserts, and cities. He spoke of storms, hunger, wars, and progress. "Our home is not perfect," he said. "It tests us every day. We build and we fall, yet we rise again. That is what makes us human." The Valorans listened in silence. They could not imagine such a world. To them, chaos was failure. Every storm, every mistake, every war was something to erase. Yet Dale spoke of those things as if they were teachers, not enemies. When he finished, Liren leaned toward him. "Commander," she asked softly, "you said no one made you. How can that be true? Everything must have a maker. Who gave you life?" Dale smiled kindly. "No one gave it to us. Life appeared, small and weak, then grew stronger with time. We learned to shape ourselves. We are not made by design, but by choice." Liren frowned. "That sounds impossible. If no one made you, then who protects you?" "Each other," he replied. "We protect one another, even when we fail. That is our way." His answer stayed in her mind long after the feast ended. She returned to her room in silence. From her balcony, she could see the stars shining across the dark sky. Each light reminded her of another world, another story. She tried to imagine what Earth must look like. A place where life began without control. A place where beings rose from nothing but nature and time. That in Valoran belief. Everything was perfect because perfection was built. Yet the humans were imperfect and still proud. They laughed, they made mistakes, and they carried both strength and weakness in equal measure. Liren found that strange, but also beautiful. Later that night, she visited the palace library. The room was vast, filled with glowing scrolls that floated in the air. The walls were made of crystal mirrors that reflected every light like stars. She searched the records of known life forms across the solar kingdom. Each file spoke of creation, of purpose, of design. But there was nothing about humans. No mention of any species from a world called Earth. It was as if they did not exist in the archives. Lyra and touched a glowing scroll that showed the creation of her own people. It said that Valorans were built by royal hands many ages ago. Their minds were shaped for peace, their bodies for beauty, their hearts for loyalty. Everything had been planned. Every line of life had a designer. She sat quietly and wondered. If the humans were telling the truth, then their existence broke every law her people believed in. Could life truly grow without being created? Could chaos give birth to reason? A soft voice broke her thoughts. It was Tarn, a scholar and friend who often worked in the library. "You are thinking about the visitors," he said with a gentle smile. Liren nodded. "They say they were not made. They say they grew from nature. It makes no sense." Tarn sat beside her. "Maybe it does, Princess. I have studied their data. Their world is harsh, but it shapes them. They are not born perfect, yet they learn to improve. They do not wait for their kings or gods to guide them. They build their own path." She looked at him, puzzled. How can anyone live without a guide? He smiled sadly. Perhaps they find meaning in the struggle itself. Liren thought about that all night. The more she imagined their history, the more she wanted to know. If humans could become what they were without design, then what did that say about life itself? As dawn touched the sky again, she stood by the window and watched the human ship resting quietly in the courtyard. She felt both fear and admiration. These beings had no creator, yet carried the strength to travel across the stars. She whispered to herself. What kind of heart must they have to survive such a world? At that moment, she decided she would find the answer. She would learn how humans were made, not from the scrolls, but from their own story. She would ask them everything, and she would listen. The Princess of Valora, raised in perfection, had just met the first imperfection she could not ignore. The next morning, the sons of Valora rose high above the palace towers, sending beams of golden light through the windows of Princess Lorraine's room. She had not slept much. Her thoughts kept returning to the strange words of Commander Dale. He had said that humans were not made by any creator. He had said that they were born from nature and time. No one on Valora had ever spoken such a thing. When the first light touched her balcony, she stood up and looked at the horizon. The city below was alive with movement. Flying carriages moved through the air. Gardens floated between tall buildings, and people walked in harmony, each one with a purpose. Everything followed order. Every life had direction. Yet the humans seemed to live without that rule. Liren dressed quickly and left her chamber. She wanted answers. She knew there was one place in the palace where she might find them. Deep below the main halls, there was a secret room called the Forbidden's Library. It held ancient records from before the time of the current kings. Only the royal family could enter, and even then, only with permission. But Liren was the king's daughter. She knew the hidden path. She walked through silent corridors, her steps echoing on the crystal floor. Guards bowed as she passed, unaware of her destination. She reached a tall door marked with glowing symbols. When she placed her hand on the center, the symbols turned blue, and the door opened with a low hum. A cool breeze came from inside. The air smelled of old metal and energy dust. The room was large and round, filled with tall pillars that carried shelves of shining data scrolls. Light floated in slow circles around the ceiling. The walls whispered softly, repeating words from ancient records. Liren stepped inside and began her search. She moved her fingers across the shelves, calling up files about creation. Scrolls appeared in the air, showing glowing letters and images. They spoke of how the royal ancestors had created life forms to fill each world. They described how creatures were shaped to serve balance. There was no mention of any species that had appeared without design. Liren frowned. She opened more records, reading faster. Each one told the same story. Life began only when the royal hand willed it. Every intelligent race in the Solar Kingdom had a written design file. Yet when she searched for human, nothing came up. The archives said there was no record of their creation. She whispered, "How can that be? If they were not made by the kings, then where did they come from?" Her voice echoed through the silent room. She turned when she heard a sound behind her. It was Taran, the royal scholar who often studied old knowledge. He was a kind man with calm eyes and a steady voice. "Princess," he said softly, "you should not be here without your father's leave." "I know," Liren replied, "but I must understand these visitors. They said they were not created. I cannot stop thinking about it." Taran smiled a little. "You are not the first to wonder such things. Many years ago, before you were born, a few scholars found records from beyond our empire. They spoke of distant planets and strange species that lived without royal design. The king ordered those records sealed. He said such ideas would bring confusion." Liren looked at him with wide eyes. "So there were others who believed in self-made life?" He nodded. "Yes, but no proof was found. Only stories carried by lost travelers. Until now, the humans are the first to stand before us and speak of such a history." Liren moved closer. "You have studied them, haven't you?" Taran sighed. "A little. I read their transmissions when their ship entered our system. Their data shows a history full of chaos and growth. Their world is not controlled by kings or makers. It changes every moment." Storms, quakes, floods, and wars shaped their lives. And yet, they continue to rise. They are both fragile and strong. It is hard to explain. The princess listened carefully. Every word made her more curious. So they grow through pain and mistake? Yes, Taran said. Their strength comes from struggle. They learn by falling and standing again. That is their way. Liren looked down at her hands. We avoid pain. We remove all that is unstable. But they walk through it willingly. Taran nodded again. That is what makes them different. Some call it madness. Others call it courage. She thought in silence. The words of Commander Dale returned to her mind. He had spoken of will and choice. Could it be that life could rise from such things instead of design? She turned back to Taran. I wish to know more. Can you bring me what you have on them? He hesitated. If the king finds out, he will not be pleased. I will take that risk, she said firmly. Tren studied her face and saw the determination there. He nodded slowly. Very well. Meet me here tonight. I will bring the files I have hidden. Liren thanked him and left quietly. She spent the rest of the day thinking about what she had learned. The palace felt different now. The perfect gardens, the smooth towers, and the ordered people suddenly seemed too controlled, too clean. She began to notice how little freedom existed. Every part of life on Velora was planned. No one made mistakes because no one was allowed to. When night came, she returned to the Forbidden's library. The air was cooler, and the stars outside glowed through the tall windows. Taran was already there, waiting beside a table filled with glowing crystals. He smiled when she entered. I have brought something you may find interesting. He touched one of the crystals, and an image appeared in the air. It showed a blue and green planet surrounded by clouds. This is Earth, he said. Liren stared at it. It was not as smooth as Velora. Its surface looked wild and uneven. It looks alive, she whispered. Yes, Taran said. It breathes through wind and water. It changes all the time. The humans say it gave them life. He touched another crystal, and new images appeared. They showed humans in many places. Some worked in fields, some built tall cities, and some fought in wars. The pictures changed quickly, showing both beauty and destruction. Liren could not look away. She asked softly, how can they survive such a world? Taran answered, they adapt. When nature pushes, they push back. When it breaks them, they rebuild. Their power is not in control, but in endurance. Liren watched a scene showing people helping each other after a storm. Children carried water, and strangers shared food. She felt something move inside her chest. They care for one another, she said. Tren nodded. They do. Even when everything falls apart, they find ways to stand together. That is what holds them. The princess was silent for a long time. Then she said, I want to meet Commander Dale again. I want to hear the story from him, not from files. Taran looked worried. Your father may not allow it. The council already questions his decision to let the humans land. Many think they are a threat. I will not tell anyone, she replied. But I must understand them. He sighed but agreed. Very well. I can send a message to the commander. You can meet him tomorrow in the garden near the east wing. It is quiet there. Liren thanked him again. As she turned to leave, Taran said one more thing. Be careful, princess. Knowledge can be powerful, but it can also be dangerous. The truth about creation may not please everyone. She smiled faintly. I am ready to know. That night, as she lay on her bed, the image of Earth filled her thoughts. She imagined walking on its green lands, feeling real wind and hearing the sound of waves. On Velora, everything was controlled by machines, even the weather. But Earth was wild and alive, She thought about the humans again. They had no wings, no glowing eyes, no special strength, yet they had crossed the stars. They had faced storms and hunger, and still reached other worlds. That kind of courage was something her people had forgotten. When morning came, she went to the East Garden as planned. The air was cool, and flowers of light floated gently in the air. The sound of soft music came from the fountains. Commander Dale was already there, waiting near a white tree. He bowed when he saw her. "Princess, it is an honor to meet you again." She smiled kindly. "I wanted to know more about your people. I read your history. It is full of struggle and change. How do you live without fear of chaos?" Dale looked at the glowing tree beside them. "Fear is part of us. But we learned that fear can guide us, not rule us. We do not wait for perfection. We move forward, even when the path is broken." Liren listened closely. "We are taught to avoid mistakes, to keep everything perfect." He nodded. "That is what makes us different. Humans are born into imperfection. It forces us to grow. Every failure teaches us how to stand stronger next time." She felt silent wonder growing in her. "So that is how you were made," she said slowly. "Not by design, but by need." Dale smiled. "Yes, we were shaped by the world we lived in. We learned from pain, hope, and love. That is our story." The princess stood quietly beside him. The truth felt heavy but beautiful. She finally began to see why humans were different. They were made not by hands, but by hearts that refused to stop. The sun rose slowly above the horizon of Valora, covering the palace gardens in golden light. The sky glowed like melted glass, and the air shimmered with soft energy. Princess Lurianne walked through the quiet garden paths, her thoughts full of questions. The meeting with Commander Dale had opened her mind to ideas she had never imagined. The humans were unlike any species she had ever met. They had no creator, no divine design, and no perfect order. Yet they lived, learned, and reached the stars. As she walked past the glowing flowers, she heard footsteps behind her. When she turned, she saw Taran, the royal scholar, walking toward her with a small data crystal in his hand. "Princess," he said softly, "the commander has invited you to visit his ship. He says he wants to show you something that will explain their story better than words." Liren hesitated. "Will the king allow it?" Taran looked unsure. "He has not been told, but the humans plan to leave soon. If you want to understand them fully, this might be your only chance." She looked toward the tall spires of the palace. Her father's rules had always been clear. No royal should board a foreign ship without permission. Yet her curiosity burned stronger than her fear. She nodded slowly. "Tell him I will come." A few hours later, Lurian arrived at the landing field where the human ship waited. The vessel was not elegant like Valoran craft. Its surface was rough and worn from travel. The metal plates showed signs of heat and time. Yet there was a quiet strength in its shape, as if it carried the spirit of those who built it. Commander Dale greeted her at the entrance with a respectful bow. "Welcome aboard, Princess," he said with a smile. "I promised I would show you the truth of our kind." Liren stepped inside. The air was cooler and filled with a faint hum from the ship's systems. The walls were plain and gray, marked with scratches and stains. Human crew members moved through the corridors, busy with their work. They smiled politely at her, their eyes curious but kind. She noticed how every person looked different in color, height, and shape. On Valora, everyone shared the same perfect design. The humans, however, carried uniqueness in every face. Dale guided her to a large room filled with glowing screens. "This is our history chamber," he said. "Here we keep the story of our world." He touched a screen, and the image of a blue and green planet appeared in front of them. "This is Earth," he said softly. "Our home." The image turned slowly, showing oceans, forests, and mountains. Liren felt a strange warmth in her chest. "It is beautiful," she whispered. Dale nodded. "Yes, but it is not gentle. It tests every creature that lives on it. From storms to hunger, it never stops changing. We were not made to rule it. We were made to survive it." The screen changed again, showing early humans walking through wild lands, fighting cold winds, hunting animals, and lighting fires. Dale spoke as the pictures moved. "Long ago, our ancestors were weak. We had no wings, no claws, and no great strength. Yet we learned to think. We learned to work together. That is how we became strong." Liren watched closely. The images showed humans building shelters, creating tools, and gathering in groups. "You were not made to be perfect," she said. "No," Dale replied. "We were made to adapt. Each time nature tried to destroy us, we found a way to rise again." The next image showed large cities full of light. Then it showed wars, machines, and smoke. "But not every rise was peaceful," Dale said quietly. "We fought each other. We made mistakes. Yet even from our worst moments, we learned." Liren felt both awe and sadness. "Your history is full of pain." "It is," he said. "But pain taught us compassion. It showed us that life has value because it ends. Every generation wants to build something better than before. That is why we reached the stars." He touched the screen again. It now showed humans standing beside alien beings, shaking hands, building stations, and exploring distant worlds. "We are not perfect," Dale continued, "but we never stop trying. That is how humans are made. Not by gods or kings, but by the will to continue." Liren stood silent for a long time. The idea filled her heart with wonder. On Valora, perfection came from control. Every creature was designed to fit a purpose. Yet here stood a species that built purpose from imperfection. She finally understood what made them powerful. She turned to Dale. "Your people grow stronger because they face struggle." He smiled. "Yes, we are like fire. We burn bright when the world tries to put us out." She walked closer to the screen, showing the earth again. "You said your world gave you life. Do you believe it is your creator?" He shook his head. "No, it gave us a beginning, but we made our path. We are not bound to our birth. We decide what we become." Liren felt her heart beat faster. "Then you are truly free. That is the word we value most," Dale said. "Freedom." He guided her to another room filled with objects from Earth. There were tools, books, and pieces of art. One wall held paintings made by human hands. Liren looked at one painting that showed a stormy sea with a small boat struggling against the waves. "This is beautiful," she said. Dale nodded. "It reminds us that we can fight even when the world turns against us." She moved to another painting that showed a group of people helping one another after a disaster. "This is hope," she said softly. "Yes," Dale replied. "It shows who we are at our best." As she looked at each piece, she began to understand why humans were proud of their story. They were not shaped by perfection, but by their endless effort to rise from their own mistakes. After some time, Dale offered her a small metal object. "This is a gift," he said. "It is a memory sphere. It holds the sunrise from Earth. When you look inside, you will see the first light that touches our world each day." She accepted it carefully. The sphere glowed softly in her hands. "Thank you," she said. "I will keep it." Before she left, she turned to Dale once more. "I understand now how humans were made. Not by power, but by endurance. Not by design, but by will." He smiled proudly. "That is the truth. It is the only story we carry." When Liren returned to the palace, the world around her looked different. The shining halls seemed less bright. The perfect gardens felt too quiet. She began to notice how much of her life was built on control. Her people avoided pain, yet the humans turned pain into progress. They feared mistakes, yet humans learned from them. Later that evening, she met with Taran again. He saw the change in her eyes. "You saw their world, did you not?" he asked. She nodded. "I did. I saw their truth. They are made of struggle and hope. They are not bound by fear. They live fully, even in chaos." Taran smiled gently. "And what did you feel when you saw it?" She looked toward the window. "I felt small and amazed. We have more beauty here, yet they have more life. They are imperfect, but they carry meaning in every breath." Taran placed his hand on her shoulder. "Perhaps perfection is not the goal, princess. Perhaps meaning is." That night, Laren sat on her balcony holding the small memory sphere. When she activated it, a soft image appeared above her palm. It showed the sunrise on Earth. Golden light spilled across oceans and mountains. The sound of wind and distant waves filled the air. It was simple, but it touched her deeply. For the first time, she understood why Dale and his people were proud. They were children of struggle, born without help. Yet they reached the stars through their will-alone. As she watched the image fade, she whispered, "Now I know why they do not fear the dark. They were born in it, and they learned to bring their own light." The next day, Lauren decided she would tell her father what she had learned. She wanted him to see that humanity was not a danger, but a lesson. Yet deep inside, she feared that the king would not understand. Still, she knew she had to try. The truth about humans was too great to be hidden. They had shown her that life did not need design to find purpose. It only needed courage to rise again and again. As the sun set over Valora, the princess stood tall beside her window. The light of the Earth's sunrise still glowed softly in her hand, reminding her that even the smallest spark could come from darkness. She was ready to speak the truth, no matter the cost. The shining halls of the Solar Palace were quiet that morning. The air felt heavy, and even the glowing crystal walls seemed dimmer than usual. Whispers passed between servants and guards. Everyone knew something serious was about to happen. The king had called a full council meeting, and all high nobles were ordered to attend. Princess Laren stood near the tall window of her chamber, looking down at the vast city below. The towers of Valora stretched into the clouds, their silver tops catching the light of the twin suns. Normally, the sight filled her with pride, but today her heart was uneasy. She knew the reason for the meeting. The humans she had befriended, the ones who had shown her what it meant to be born free, were now prisoners of her father. She pressed her hands together and tried to stay calm. She remembered Commander Dale's words, spoken in the dim light of their cell. "We have known change before, but they never held us forever." His calmness surprised her. Even when captured, he did not show fear. That was something she admired and could not forget. Soon, a servant came to her door and bowed deeply. "Princess, His Majesty requests your presence in the council chamber." Laren nodded and followed him, her steps echoing against the marble floor. As she walked, her mind raced with thoughts of what she might say. She wanted to defend the humans, to tell her father they were not dangerous, but she feared his reaction. The council chamber was vast and circular, filled with nobles, advisors, and generals. At the center sat the king on his high seat, wearing a crown made of radiant crystal. His expression was calm but firm. The light from the skylight fell upon him, making him seem more like a statue than a man. When Laren entered, everyone bowed slightly. She took her place beside him, her face pale but composed. The king began to speak. "My daughter, members of the council, and citizens of Valora. Today, we must decide the fate of the visitors who call themselves humans. They arrived without permission, brought strange ideas, and now we must decide if they are a threat to our people." A low murmur spread through the room. Some nodded in agreement, others stayed silent. The king raised his hand for silence. Reports from our scholars say these beings were not created by any known civilization. They claim to have come from a world that shaped them by chance. They have no design, no creator, no divine order. Such beings are unstable and dangerous to our balance. A tall nobleman named Lord Saren stood up. Your Majesty, I agree. These creatures might look harmless, but if they were truly made by nature, then they are unpredictable. They could destroy themselves or worse, influence us with their wild ways. Another advisor added, we have lived under order for thousands of years. Every being in the solar kingdom was shaped with purpose. But these humans follow no purpose but their own. That makes them a danger to all creation. Liren could no longer stay silent. She stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with feeling. Father, council members, you speak of danger, but have you seen what they can do? I have spoken with them, learned from them. They may not have been created as we were, but they are not without purpose. Their strength lies in their freedom, and their will to rise even when they fall. A few gasps came from the nobles. One of them whispered, the princess defends them. The king looked at his daughter with surprise. Liren, you speak boldly. You have always respected the law of creation. Why defend those who deny it? She took a deep breath. Because they show me something I have never seen in all our history. They are not guided by divine makers, yet they create art, they heal, they dream, they love. They built cities and explored the stars without being told to. If we destroy them or treat them as less, we lose the chance to learn what makes them strong. The room fell silent. The king's eyes softened for a moment, but then grew hard again. You speak with emotion, but emotion cannot rule an empire. If these humans truly carry the strength you describe, that very strength may one day challenge us. Lord Saren nodded. Your Majesty, she is young and kind-hearted, but her words prove the danger. The humans have already begun to influence her. If they can sway the princess, imagine what they could do to others. Liren turned to the crowd. Influence is not corruption. They taught me courage and truth. Is that something to fear? The council chamber erupted in argument. Some shouted that the humans must be studied in secret. Others demanded exile or even destruction of their ship. The king raised his hand once more. Enough. I have decided. The humans will remain under guard until we understand their nature. They will be studied for the safety of the kingdom. Liren's heart sank. She wanted to speak again, but she saw the finality in her father's eyes. The meeting ended, and the crowd began to leave, their voices blending into a low hum of disagreement. Later that night, she walked through the dim halls toward the holding cells deep beneath the palace. The guards recognized her and stepped aside. Inside the cell sat Commander Dale and his crew. They looked tired but calm. Dale smiled faintly when he saw her. I heard the decision, he said quietly. So we are to be studied like animals. Liren lowered her gaze. I am sorry. I tried to change his mind. Dale stood and approached the barrier between them. Do not be sorry, Princess. You have done more than we expected. Your father fears what he cannot control. That fear is not new to us. On Earth, we face rulers who thought the same. What did you do? She asked softly. We survived. We taught our children to be better. We kept our fire alive. He placed his hand against the barrier. Do not let your light fade because others fear it. Her eyes filled with emotion. She realized then that humanity's greatest weapon was not their machines or ships, but their spirit. They faced chains, pain, and fear, yet they never surrendered their will. When she returned to her room, she could not sleep. The memory of their calm faces haunted her. They did not hate the ones who imprisoned them. Instead, they showed quiet strength. She knew she could not let them remain as test subjects. They deserved freedom. The next evening, under the cover of darkness, Laren moved through the palace with quiet steps. She carried a small key made of crystal that could open their cell. When she reached the lower levels, she found the guards asleep, affected by the mild sleeping gas she had secretly released through the vents. She unlocked the cell, and the humans looked at her in shock. "You must go," she whispered. "Now, before the guards wake." Dale hesitated. "If we leave, your father will punish you." "I will face that," she said firmly. "You once told me that freedom is worth any cost. Let me see if that is true." Dale nodded slowly. "You are brave, princess. Your people may not understand now, but one day they will." Together, they moved through the corridors. The night was silent except for the hum of energy lines in the walls. When they reached the docking bay, Lorene helped them aboard their ship. Before stepping inside, Dale turned to her and held out a small metallic sphere. "This holds a recording of our world," he said. "The light of our sunrise. Keep it, and remember that even in the darkest hour, humans rise again." She accepted it, her hands trembling. "Thank you. I will never forget you." As the ship lifted off and vanished into the sky, she stood alone, holding the glowing sphere close to her heart. She knew her act of mercy would bring consequences, but she did not care. Something had changed inside her. The humans had shown her a truth stronger than any law of creation at dawn. When the first rays of light entered the palace, alarms began to sound. The king was informed that the humans had escaped. His face turned pale with anger, but when he heard his daughter had been seen near the docks, his anger turned to silence. He stood by the window, looking out at the rising sun. Somewhere in that light, a ship carried away the beings his daughter had risked everything for. He did not yet understand why, but he felt that something greater than control had just entered his world and far above the clouds. The human ship moved toward the stars, carrying the hope of two worlds, one bound by design and one born of will. The morning after the humans escaped, the solar palace was filled with tension. Guards ran through the halls, nobles whispered in fear, and the great alarms still echoed in the distance. The king stood on the highest balcony, his cloak flowing in the wind as he looked toward the horizon. The twin suns rose slowly, painting the sky in gold and red. He could see faint trails in the air left by the human ship as it disappeared into space. His heart was heavy. He was a ruler who believed in order and purpose. Every life in his kingdom had been shaped through design, every creature made with intent. Yet now, his only daughter had broken that sacred order for a group of beings born of chaos. Behind him, the sound of soft footsteps echoed. It was Princess Lorene. She stood with her head bowed, her face pale but calm. The king turned slowly. "You freed them," he said. His voice was not angry, only tired. Double quotes. "Yes, father," she answered quietly. He studied her for a long moment. "Do you understand what you have done? You disobeyed my command, betrayed the laws of creation, and placed your name in question before the entire kingdom." Liren lifted her eyes to meet his. "I understand, but I could not let them suffer. They were not monsters, father. They were people, just like us, maybe even stronger than us." The king's expression hardened. "Stronger? They are unstable. They are creatures made without design. How can chaos be stronger than order?" "Because their strength is not from perfection," she said softly. "It comes from choice, from courage, from the will to live without being shaped by others. They showed me that freedom can create beauty too." Her words struck him, but he turned away. "Freedom without guidance leads to ruin. You have seen what happens to those who defy balance." "I have also seen what happens when people never change," she replied. "We repeat the same stories, the same fears. The humans may be wild, but they grow. They fail, then rise again. We cannot say the same. The king was silent. For the first time, he felt doubt in the truth he had ruled by for so long. Later that day, he called for a private meeting with his council. The chamber was filled with tension. Lord Saren spoke first. "Your Majesty, the humans are gone. We can still send our ships after them and bring them back." The king raised a hand. "No, let them go." The nobles were shocked. Murmurs filled the room. One advisor said, "But sire, they have taken our trust and broken our laws. If we do nothing, we appear weak." The king looked at them calmly. "Perhaps strength is not only found in control. Perhaps there is something to learn from those who walk without a creator." The council fell silent. None dared to argue further. They bowed and left the chamber one by one. Only Lord Saren lingered. "Your Majesty, forgive my boldness, but the princess has changed you." The king looked toward the window, his voice low. "Maybe she has reminded me that a ruler must also have the courage to see beyond fear." When the council left, the king walked alone through the quiet halls. He stopped before the great mural in the throne room. It showed the history of the Valorans, their birth from the hands of ancient creators, their rise through science and order. Every image told a story of control, of design. Yet now, for the first time, he wondered what their world would look like without those chains. Meanwhile, Liren sat in her chamber, holding the glowing sphere Dale had given her. When she touched it, the metal surface shimmered, and a beam of light rose into the air. It formed a small image of Earth. She saw blue oceans, green forests, and golden fields. Cities full of people working, laughing, and dreaming appeared one by one. The image changed again to show faces, men, women, and children of every kind. She watched with awe. These people had no creators guiding them, yet they had built a world so full of life. Her heart felt warm, and tears filled her eyes. She whispered, "You showed me what it means to be alive." A gentle knock came at her door. She quickly hid the sphere under a cloth and said, "Enter." The king stepped inside. His face was softer now, not the stern mask she had seen earlier. "May I sit?" he asked. Liren nodded. He took a seat across from her. For a while, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the palace energy lines. Finally, the king said, "You loved them, didn't you? Not as a ruler loves her people, but as someone who found truth in their words." Liren hesitated. "I admired them. They opened my eyes. I saw something in them that I have never seen here. They live every moment as if it matters. They fall, but they rise again without help. It made me realize how empty our perfection is." The king looked at her carefully. "When I was young, I believed perfection was the purpose of creation. But when I became king, I saw how hard it was to keep balance. Every generation we shape new beings, remove their flaws, and call it progress. Yet even now, our people feel hollow. Perhaps the humans are not wrong. Perhaps creation without freedom is not life at all." Liren looked surprised. "You believe that?" "I am beginning to," he said quietly. "The humans came to us not with weapons, but with ideas. They risked everything to show us how they live. Maybe their chaos hides a kind of wisdom." He reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did what you thought was right. You disobeyed me, but you did it to protect something pure. That takes courage. A ruler must have courage too." Liren felt tears rise again. "I was afraid you would hate me." The king shook his head. "I could never hate my daughter. You made me see what I had forgotten. The universe is larger than our laws." They sat together for a long time, watching the sun set beyond the mountains. The light faded slowly, and the stars began to appear, filling the sky like silver dust. That night, the king stood on the same balcony where he had watched the human ship vanish. He held a small crystal recorder and began to speak his thoughts. To the people of Valora, he said. Our history has been built on design and control. We have shaped life to serve order and called it creation. But today I have seen another truth. There are beings beyond our reach who live without our rules, who rise from chaos yet carry purpose. They are called humans, and they have shown us what it means to create without control. From this day forward, we will no longer see freedom as weakness. We will learn from it. The message spread across the solar kingdom the next day. Many were shocked, others inspired. For the first time in generations, the idea of creation without design became a subject of discussion. Not fear. In the following weeks, artists began to paint new forms. Scientists began to experiment beyond the limits of perfection. And thinkers began to speak of will and spirit. Something within the people of Valora had changed. Lauren often stood by her window, holding the glowing sphere. She had watched the recording of Earth many times. Each time she saw it, she felt a strange warmth in her chest. One evening, her father joined her. They will return one day, he said quietly. Do you think so? She asked. I believe so, he replied. Beings like them never stay hidden for long. They travel because they seek connection. And perhaps when they come again, we will meet them as equals, not as masters. Liren smiled faintly. I hope so. I want to show them that we learned something from them. The king nodded. We already have. You taught me that life is not just about being made. It is about making yourself. They stood in silence, watching the stars together. Far away, among those distant lights, a small human ship drifted between worlds. Inside it, Commander Dale looked at the same stars and thought of the young princes who had risked everything for them. He smiled and whispered, she understood. Back on Valora, the royal city continued to glow, but now there was something new in its light. A spark of freedom had entered its heart. It was small, but strong enough to grow. The king knew that his world would never be the same. The humans had left behind more than a message. They had left a seed of change. And as long as the stars shone, that seed would continue to grow, reminding every living being that creation was not the work of gods alone, but of courage, choice, and the will to rise again.